بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we seek Allah's guidance. For whomsoever Allah guides, truly they are guided right, and whomsoever Allah allows to be misguided, there is no one who can guide them. We bear witness that there is nothing that deserves to be worshipped except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his servant and his last messenger. And so alhamdulillah, we are here again, and we thank Allah for that. And so we just want to touch on some of the aspects of, last week we were talking about the desires, the levels of desires, and how desires can affect the faculties of the human being on every level once it's damaged, or once one follows or take a sip from their desires, the lower desires, that constantly gets us into the troubles and the struggles that we are faced with. In fact, the desires and the lower desires is a subject that needs to be addressed so much because of the strong propensity that it has. It is created with a powerful propensity to aspire and to want. And that's why it's important that we have to gain control over it, because not getting control, it takes away the control. The willpower is destroyed. Determination becomes diminished. And so, as it is said, كلما ازدادت حياة القلب على ارتفاع تقريرها, which means the more the life of the heart and the soul, right, the higher its determination. So the more that you have life in your heart, determination in your soul, the more you have the life of it, the higher your determination. So you will reach and aspire to elevations of growth and development. And again, these developments and this growth depends on one controlling the lower aspects of the human being, the things that kind of weighs humans down to lower states. And progress is always moving up. And as you notice, the lower desires is down, and it's always gravitating, pulling down. So we have this constant struggle between the lower desires trying to pull and gravitate towards down, and the higher aspiration of the human being is always striving to move up. And at least this is the pace that we are supposed to be in, is towards more progress. And that's based on determination. So the more light that your heart has, the more it's able to see. And the more determination that it has the ability to struggle against devices. And again, it mentions also, أضعف أن القلب هو أضعف من تصميمه. The weaker that the determination or the heart is, or the desires, the weaker of its determination. So based on strength and weakness, how strong one's determination is based on how much determination the heart has, how much life it has, how much the soul has, how much the power of will have. And these are all the communities of self, right? So the community of self, with outside the community, there's the external community that we must enter. And based on the community of self will be a reflection of the external community of humanity. So most of the things that's in our environment and the vices that are contaminated elements are displayed from the community of self. So if the community of self is building this determination to perfect itself, then society's environment, when it enters, will also be what we call islaha, rectified, reformed. So most of the time, people are trying to reform society based on these, protocols, and it never does. It never reforms anything, right? And the reason why, because the formula that they're using is not the true formula to reform a society. The society that works within is a society within itself, the society within ourselves. If that society is not on a level of islah, reformation, then the external world and society will never be reformed. And so you see the dilemma today that they are constantly always have to revise, right, the law or amendments and change things based on circumstances, because really they're not trying to change anything. They're trying to manage the crisis that's going on, because making any real change will not do well for the system that is trying to, demoralize and dehumanize society, right? So this is another thing that we're struggling with. So we can't change society, right? And that includes people. You cannot change the system, right? And so therefore you have to prepare yourself for this reformation from within, so you will be able to deal with the vices, because it's not going to change at this moment, right? And so it's more dignified for us to be more paying attention to our own personal reformation, right? And revising whatever needs to be revised in our character, in our behavior, in our thinking, right? So the weaker that the heart is, the weaker of its determination, the weaker of your willpower. When it's weak, right, and feeble, like a dim light, it doesn't shine so people can't see clearly, right? So the determination has to be there, willpower, effort, right? And so this is a progress. It becomes a progress as they say, a progress report. Progress reports on ourselves are something that's a daily maintenance, right? That is neglected today. Progress report on ourselves are always seeing how we fare in ourselves and who we interact with, right? Interpersonal relationships, on all those relationships. You're always relating to something. Humans are always relating to something. And it's based on how we have reformed ourselves to relate either in a way that is progressive or relate in a way where it's degressive. And again, because you can't change people, it is always mandatory for you to reform yourself. So that when you see the negative aspects of individuals who are not having these progress reports within themselves, then you'll be able to meet it with the determination of purity, because you're working on yourself. So this is a very important aspect of human development, right? So human development is more so in terms of a science. Human development is a science. It's not just a studies from school. It's a science that has been lost in translation, because human development is not about the progresses of a civilization on how people do things with new technology, as we believe that we're in a civilization, right? And when you look at the word civil, it means ethics or morals, right? So the liization part is when the people are practicing, or that environment is built on ethics and morals. So the society that you're living in that was mistranslated, it's not a civilization. It's an environment of people operating based on particularly the lower desire, right? Globalization, materialism, promiscuous behavior, cheating, gambling, prostitution, liquor, alcohol, drugs, all of this, just because it's organized and just because it's surviving, does not mean that it's a civilization, right? Because a civilization truly is built on ethics and morals, and it sets the stage for a moral-based society. And we're not living in a moral-based society, right? Most people are living off of the desires, right? That's why they call it globalization, capitalism, and all these words to define so-called progressive America, which actually America is in degression, right? And that is only because they lack moral compass. And when you lack moral compass, there's no way that your society will be the element of what we call civilization, right? So technology does not bring morals, it just brings new ways. In some cases, it's deficient and causes deficiencies, because now we're relying on technology so much that we don't rely on the capabilities that we have within our brain, right? Using the brain power, right? Our cells are no longer being occupied, so it develops cobwebs because everything is remote and everything is technical. You know, computers, phones, and all of these things actually are destroying the natural capabilities of the mind, right? And so no one no longer memorize numbers and phones and stuff like that. So you can see that technology has its benefit, but a society of people who do not have themselves in check, it becomes a danger. Same thing with Facebook. It has benefit, but to a people who are already demoralized, for people who have never worked on their community of self, right? And so you see all their inner communities manifested, and it spills out. What they say on Facebook, what they do on Facebook, shows that they have lacked morality from within. So whatever they are possessing comes out wherever they are, whatever platform that is, right? So civilization is not a civilization unless it's based on moral ethics, right? And so that's the approach to human development. From the other perspective, the secular concept is that they're dealing with how we advance, right? Human development in terms of how we have come into new discoveries of technology and science. And so we see that science has come now to its lowest point, that science of the matrix has been contradictive from what we've been learning when we were in school in science. It does not add up to the facts of true knowledge and moral science. So there's a science and then there's a moral science, right? So we're in the age of a demoralized scientific experiment in terms of things that used to be what it was is no longer that anymore, right? It's based on people's maneuvering their interpretations. And this is all because of the human being involved, right, to change the discourse of something, or to what we call interpolate, or what we call to alter, to try to alter the natural function of things, right? And so we get this situation where human development is no longer the true science of religion, because religion and science goes together. But most people say, well, you know, religion is based on belief, science is based on facts. Well, belief is also based on facts. It's just the matter of what facts you have and what you believe, right? So these concepts float from humanistic perspectives, people who are actually teaching you their agenda, their belief, right? And these statements are mimicked by people who are under their influence, right? So alhamdulillah, we are a people of a history that has factual information, and we talk about the Quran and the science of the Quran, right? Because it's the word of Allah. And so it puts everything in perspective, because the heavens and earth cannot be defined by a scientist except that he understands how Allah created the heavens and earth. The constellations as well, when we deal with astrology, right? There's always a positive side of astrology, and there's always a negative side of astrology. Today we've been infiltrated by the poison of astrology, right? So much that we find ourselves looking in horoscopes to define who we are. We don't no longer go according to when Allah says we created man. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا إِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We don't look at this verse as the basis of character. Naturally, we were created in the best of symmetry, right? The best mode, the best system as the human development. So now we're looking towards the horoscopes to see what makes our behavior be this. So I say if I'm a Gemini, then they say he's two-faced. Or if he's a bull, then that means he's stubborn. And if he's a Scorpion, or an Aries, we start now looking towards the horror of the scope about us and allowing something of false astrology to be associated to our character and our morals, instead of the one who created us in the character that we have. So we get demoralized by entering the false sciences and the false concept of human development. So everything now we're defining by labels. Things start defining us outside of ourselves, right? So you become introverted and extroverted. These words were never used 200 years ago, right? So these are new ways to define why you are the way you are, instead of your fitrah, right? So it's challenging the natural function of your nature, right? Introvert and extrovert. Well, the reason why I'm like this, because I don't. What about you just being created that way, that you don't like going out? And it has nothing to do with being introverted or extroverted. Everybody is created on the character, and they will act according to their disposition. That's what we call taqdeer, right? Allah created everything with a disposition. No one can assign introversion and extroversion. No, this is all false human development, right? Allah tells you why you are the way you are. You need to find that out. And you don't need to be going to the horoscopes looking for a sign that defines your behavior. That's an excuse to be two-faced, an excuse to be bull-headed and stubborn, right? The reason why he's a Taurus, so he's born under this zodiac sign, right? So that's why he's the way. Those are all rationalization of our misbehavior, right? So that he acts like that because he's a Taurus. So now it's accepted because he's a Taurus, and he can't do anything about it because he's born on this day. This is false science and false astrology, right? So again, what causes that? So we're talking about purity of character and thoughts, right? Purity of character and thoughts, right? I should say purity of thoughts and then character, right? Right? Because basically, once something is a thought, it becomes a behavior. You see? Once something is a thought, it becomes a behavior. But we understand, right? So there's a mentioning by one of the great scholars. He said, يَتَّطَلَّبُ كَمَالَ الذَّاتِ شَيْئَيْنِ, right? يَتَّطَلَّبُ كَمَالَ الذَّاتِ شَيْئَيْنِ. The perfection of character requires two things. يَجِبُ أَن تَكُونَ دَوْلَةً عميقة الجذور وجزعا. Right? One of them is it should be a deep-rooted state and an indispensable part of one's character. Right? So that means perfection of character requires two. Right? يجب أن تكون دولة عميقة الجذور وجزعا لا يحسد عليه من شخصية المرء. Two, it should be a character of perfecting within himself. So, here we are. The perfection of character requires two things. It should be a deep-rooted state and an indispensable part of one's character. Meaning it should never go away. Indispensable. It should never be not within you. Your character. Right? It should have continuity. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ came. He said, I've come except that I came to perfect good character, not change personality. And sometimes we get these two things mixed up. Shakhsiyah, right? And khuluq, right? Khuluq is the character that is within you. And personality is who you are, right? We must change character when character is deficient or demoralized, right? So khuluq, created with the characteristics. And it has to be indispensable. That's one of the states. يتطلب كمال الذات شيئين يجب أن تكون دولة عميقة الجذور وجزعا لا يحسد عليه من شخصية المرء. It should be a character of perfection within himself. So that's why we're talking about the community of self, working on the community within our own selves, the reason, the emotions, the desires, the intelligence, the knowledge, the soul, right? All these things, right? Have to be there, right? So, and the reason why we're always talking about deeds, because that's what we do. Verbs, right? Describe the action. That's what we are. And even in the grave, the only thing that will stay with you is the verbs, your deeds, right? Everything else goes back or stays back when you're in the grave. You are there with your deeds, right? So, misdeeds, they spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty, right? Misdeeds. Now, just reading that, you should think about kind of answering that. Why does misdeeds spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty? Right? Why does misdeeds spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty? That's a question that you should try to come with an answer. Don't stay in class just listening to what I'm saying. Right? Okay? Right? Okay? Misdeeds spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty. Aisha, you want to try that? What does that mean?
I can try. I don't think I'm going to hit it well. But,
it's okay. We're here to do the right thing.
Misdeeds spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, it's a question. Why does that happen? Because I'm guessing... How can I put this? Like, okay, your bad deeds are powerful, and it changes. It changes the whole. It can change the whole being. It can change the whole outlook and intentions of things.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going on, because when you say a faculty, if you give me like what do you mean
faculty? Something that you use to, like your faculties is your eyes, your senses.
Okay.
Your eyes, your intelligence, your mind, your ears, faculties. So misdeeds spoil or corrupt the reason of faculty. that thing that is able to give us clarity to things. If
That's kind of like saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, yeah, you know how you do something, say you do something bad, and you say it's a mistake the first time, second time, but the more you do it, it starts to spoil you who you really are. So it's kind of like it takes away from everything you really are, your beliefs, your true, not your belief, but your true being. It corrupts everything that's really true about you. So it kind of overtakes what is really what you are, what you stand for.
That's good.
So now it's correcting and spoiling it because it's so powerful over that.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, Miss D, that's a good answer there. Yeah, Miss D spoil and corrupt the reason. Your reasoning is supposed to teach you between bad deeds and good deeds. And your reasoning is there to make you have rationale about what is good for you and what is not, and what is detrimental and what is not, right? So that's the whole idea of your reason. And so when you do misdeeds, what you're doing is damaging the faculty of reasoning, right? And so it kind of smears what you reasonably should do, right? The choices and decisions you make. Also, one of the community of selves is emotions. Emotions have to stay in its place. If not, it will get in front of reason, right? If your emotions is in front of your reasoning, then you're going to be in a problem. When you're supposed to use your rationale instead of your emotions in this area, when reasonable situations. Reason teaches us that the fire is hot, right? If I put my hand in it, it burns, right? Your reason is supposed to be the king at the moment and not your emotions, because if I use the emotions, I'm going to look past the fire being fire and that it burns, right? I'm just going to stay in it, right? So that's the difference. So misdeeds corrupt the reasoning of faculty. So reason has a light. It is supposed to turn on when things are dark. It is supposed to make you say, hey, wait a minute. I see it clearly. I understand it clearly. It's being shown to me. So reasonably, I should say, hey, I need to go the other direction because I see clearly danger in front of me. I rationalize it and I know what it can cause, right? So it has this light that turns on, and the misdeeds extinguishes this light, right? And when its light is put out, it becomes weak and dim. So some people have light, but it's dim. They don't see as clear as people whose their reason of light is more bright. So they don't see it clearly, right? And if they don't see it clearly, then they operate blindsided, nearly. One eye is blind. One part of his understanding is blind. It's like they say side swipe. I didn't look in the rear mirror, right? Or the side mirror, right? So his side mirrors are not working correctly. His rationale is dim, that he can't reason out his situation or the situations. And the way he see things, he conceptualize things in the total opposite of understanding, believing that he's on the path of understanding. And that's generally, right? It becomes weak and dim. So they say one who disobeys Allah, his reason disappears, or it's suspended at the moments of the disobedience. What does that mean? Right? That one who disobeys Allah, his reason disappears, or it's suspended at the moments of the disobedience.
When you disobey Allah, your faith has disappeared. Your iman at the time that you're doing the disobedience.
Right. Yeah, you heard that? Y'all heard that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who want to give another shot? One who disobeys Allah, his reason disappears or is suspended at the moments of the disobedience.
Because mainly, when you disobey Allah, you go against His commands. Your reasoning, your intelligence, your understanding of what you're supposed to do is taken from you because you're going against what you're supposed to do to make better judgment.
Right.
So it's kind of like having your heart blackened at the moment. You know, it's like now you just behaving against what Allah's saying. So now your reasoning to knowing what you're supposed to do, your right and wrong conscience is like gone because your body, you're not abiding by what you're supposed to do. So it overtakes with the bad deeds and everything.
Right. Absolutely. That's the correct thing. Right. So when one disobeys the law, his reason disappears or is suspended because it's not a permanent thing. So it's suspended. It disappears, meaning it goes away at the moment of the disobedience. So that means it's not there. Right. And so people don't see how they injure their souls when sin. See, this is what we don't see. These are the things we don't see because these are spiritual diseases that are not actually identified through pain, right? And some of the signs of that, when you don't have pain about a spiritual disease, that is the problem itself. Because when a soul is awakened or a heart is alive, it feels the spiritual
guilt, kind of.
Yes. And so they feel it. And they are considered, but people who are desensitized, right? They don't feel any of what's going on. That's why they'll continue to do it, and they'll continue to do it, and continue to do it, which we'll get into this part now, right? So this is obvious because if his reason were present, it would stop him or her from committing the sin, right? That makes sense. That's why it disappears. That's why it's suspended. Because if it was present, right, then it would have used its light to shed on the sin that's being committed, right?
Right. You would have better judgment.
You'll have better judgment.
About to take a drink and then you remember Allah and what your commands are and you use your better reasoning, then you're like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. But because you don't use your better reasoning, it disappears. You're not thinking about that no more. You're just behaving off what you want and what your desires are.
So now here we go back to desires, and another thing, the dangers of lower desires. It always interferes with the faculties from the physical and the spiritual level. And Zahra, she says, when reason is suspended, it's the consequence of disobedience. Absolutely. Right. So there's consequences for when something is suspended that's supposed to be vigilant at that moment. And so taqwa is to have vigilancy, awareness, right? So sins also blocks what we call cognitive awareness. Cognitive is something that deals with the mind being focused, having better discernment, like you said, right? So when sins begin to block or disappear, guess what happens? We get the opposite of that cognitive awareness. We get cognitive dissonance. Everyone knows what that is? Cognitive dissonance. The sins and the disobedience continuously causes cognitive dissonance. Anyone knows what that means?
Yeah, dissonance, you said?
Dissonance.
Dissonance.
Which is it?
Yeah. I'm thinking would be your cognitive functions are not functioning correctly.
So the dissonance is that this person, right, he don't want to be aware of his sin. He don't want to be aware of his disobedience. So anything that mirrors him with self-reflection, he pushes it away. Dissonance, right? To try to ignore it. He don't want to recognize it. He don't want to see himself, the wrong and the disobedience and the sin, right? So this is what it does. So in order to do that, it falls in the state of denial, right? So you put yourself in a state of denial. You don't want to recognize your own sin, your transgression, your disobedience. So you push it away, or you rationalize the behavior. This is what we're good at. We rationalize the misbehavior so that we won't have to feel the discomfort of what we're doing. So it's called cognitive dissonance. You don't want to feel the discomfort about something that's true about you, or something you are doing that's transgressive. Because you want to continue, again, desires are in pursuit. The desires is always in pursuit, because the desires want something that's going to suit its fancy, right? Something that gives it the pleasure to do these things. And oftentimes lower desires don't want to be punished, don't want to be checked, don't want a muzzle or a bridle upon it, right? To train it from being disorderly, right? And they always give you charges like disorderly conduct, right? And then the world is really guilty and charged with disorderly conduct, because disorderly conduct is always about an outward deed to them. But disorderly conduct is when you don't have good adab on a continuous basis. You're always involved in immoral behavior, immoral acts, sins, dealing in interest, gambling. This is disorderly conduct, and this is a way of life of America, right? So they have a false perception of human development. It is all superficial. It has no real transformation of anything, right? So cognitive dissonance, the one that don't want to recognize his transgressions. And he displaces. They call it frustration, displacement, aggression. Frustration, displacement, aggression. Anyone knows what that is? Just break down the word. Frustration, displacement, aggression. Right? This is a good point too. So the one who projects on others to avoid accountability. Cognitive dissonance. Excellent.
Displacement, aggression as well.
Yes, displacement also. And he's aggressively displacing the characteristics from himself and trying to transfer it to someone else, because, as Zahra said, don't want to take accountability. So he's always what we call pseudo-speciating, always otherizing other people, right? You always saying him and her, you, right? You know, pseudo-speciate. You otherize people. You put them in the place that you are, and you displace it from yourself, and you do it aggressively. You get frustrated with yourself because you can't explain yourself and bring yourself from perplexity of ignorance, right? Very ignorant about what you think about things. So when you can't get out of it, you get frustrated. Then you start displacing the blame, right? From yourself to someone else, because you don't want accountability, right? That's the danger of sin. Purity of character is very important. And the thoughts, because once it's a thought, it becomes an action. And it becomes a behavior. And then it develops to an attitude. And that's where you get your attitude, right? From particular, you either have a good attitude or a bad one. You have to create an attitude is very necessary for psychological development, right? Having a good attitude about things, right? Part of thinking, having good thoughts. We have really, the word dhann means an idea or a concept, but it also means thoughts, right? We have bad thoughts about one another. Clearly, we have bad thoughts. And we're filtered with bad thinking about one another, right? Especially the African descent people. They always have bad thoughts of each other, even to the best of them learning, Islam, right? Either they learn Islam and they have the capability of consuming knowledge, but it doesn't change their behavior. They still have to get educated in behavior and character. And so they always think bad of each other. We think bad of each other, right? We'll say things to each other that we won't say to other groups, ethnic groups, right? We'll demonize each other more, right? And not to say that you should demonize other groups, but we're always attack killers amongst ourselves. We're like attack bulls amongst ourselves, always trying to kill the person some kind of way, either through his character or through killing him through his representation. So if he's not good enough for you as a Muslim, is as if you think you have the authority to actually provide what a Muslim is from your perspective. And we start getting into things and looking and making, statements and behaviors towards each other that are so hateful because we have bad thinking. We still have not worked on our character, right? Okay, so this is obvious, as we said, right? Now, customary, right? When sins and these deeds get customary, right? This is the seriousness, right? Customary sins covers the heart, and reason blinds it from seeing, which will be comprehension and understanding, right? So, what do I mean by customary?
You're accustomed to doing. It might be something that your tribe does, like, beating women, like it's just customary in your life, in your amongst your people.
You make these sins traditional. It's a custom. You get accustomed to doing the sin as if it's a tradition. And traditions come around every year, right? But in this case, it's every day. You're accustomed to doing this. And when you get accustomed to doing wrong things, it becomes a custom to you. It becomes your way. And you believe, just because you've been doing it that way, you believe that is the reason why it's correct. And it's totally incorrect. When you start customizing your sins, it covers the heart and your reason. And it blinds it from seeing, which will be comprehension, right? So the person won't be able to comprehend things about life, right? And understanding. And when this happens after guidance and understanding, it turns over and the upper part becomes the lower part. What does that mean? The upper part becomes the lower part. Yes, it's a custom. So it's a custom for you. It's like the Eid, right? The Eid, right? Eid means something that comes around every year that someone participates in. So the Eid is customary. It comes around. And so sins is something that a person customized in. It's like he does it as if it's supposed to be traditional, right? So when we say, when this happens after guidance, meaning after the person has been guided and understanding came, it turns over, right? What turns over? And the upper part becomes the lower part. What does that mean? Yes, habit. Customary is habit, patterns, absolutely, right? What you say?
Your heart.
So your heart turns up, right? It turns over. Your heart turns over. The upper part, which is the uprightness about you, the clarity of you, becomes the bottom part. And the bottom part becomes the upper part. And that's an upside down heart. The upside down heart, and that's why they call it qalb. Takallub means to alter, to turn inside, outward, up, and down. That's why they call it takallub. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ offered the dua, O changer of hearts, establish my heart upon your deen. Because the heart constantly changes and alters and it floats like a feather when the wind blows. It goes this way and that way. So what happens, this person's comprehension and his understanding is turned upside down because his heart's comprehension is turned upside down, right? And it becomes the lower part. His thinking becomes backwards, right? He becomes to think or conceptualize what he's reading or hearing. He sees it backwards. And he tries to apply it to outside of himself. Always he's applying it wrong because he's backwards in his thinking, right? His thinking becomes backwards and misplaced, right? It blocks out the mental capacity. You see, it blocks out the mental capacity. So they say, يَبَقَى خَيْرُ عَنْدَمَا تَكُونُ الْمَعْرِفَةِ فِي الْأَمَّةِ. Good remains when knowledge is in the nation, right? Good remains when knowledge is in the nation, right? Foundation, right? And then, وَيَمُوتُ عَنْدَمَا لَا تَكُونَ مَعْرِفَةُ مُوجُودًا, right? And dies when knowledge is not there. So when knowledge disappears in a nation, then that nation dies, right? And when knowledge is present there, then that makes the nation alive. But the knowledge we're talking about is the science of good character. So you see that the morals of society is dead, right? The ailing humanity, which means they're sick, right? Morally, and it's degenerated. You see that. People's behavior, their character is degenerated. And they're low to the lowest of their nafs, because that grabbed them. That's what the nafs do, lower. It grabs from progress, right? And it stops the growth, right? So that's the danger of these sins and how it causes people to break down, right? So you see, purity of character is very important because they mentioned in the poetry, yumkinun nas, right? Yumkinun nasi an yathaku bika faqata andama takuna aqwaluka wa af'aluka wa mabada'uka muttawafaqatan wa muttasaqatan. People can only trust you when your words, actions, and principles are all in line and consistent, right? And that is based on character, right? People can only trust you when your words, actions, and principles are all aligned and consistent. So the inconsistencies that we see within ourselves, our statements and our actions, all is because the trust has been damaged about that person. You can't trust him. Because, why? His words, his actions, and his principles are not in line and consistent with good character. So now every time he makes a statement, he betrays the statement. When he makes the promises, he betrays the promises. Right? And this is bad character. Right? Right? So it is very important that we realize some of the things that happens from the sin and why importance to purifying our thoughts, right? And another statement is because there are reasons behind the sins and desires, right? Tas'addatu bi shagafin illa kulli ma tama'iba adatu, ما تماعب عاده عنها, right? The self eagerly seeks whatever has been kept away from it, right? تسعدات بشغف إلا كل ما تماعب عاده عنها. The self eagerly seeks whatever has been kept away from it. What does that mean? Right? Anytime you tell somebody not to do something, right? Not to do something or something's forbidden and unlawful, the lower desires always get curious to still want to pursue it.
Even more.
Huh?
Even more.
Even more. So when someone tells someone that you can't do that, the lower self is curious always to pursue it even more. So the self eagerly seeks whatever has been kept away from it. Right? وَكُلَّمَا زَادَ right? حَرَامَانُ الْأَمْرِ زَادَتُ النَّفْسُ فِي الْمُتَّبَعَتِهِ right? The more a matter is forbidden, the further the self pursues it. Right? So the self eagerly seeks whatever has been kept away from it. Right? The more a matter is forbidden, the further the self pursues the forbidden. This is why people chase the forbidden, the unlawful. It's desirable, right? So even in the statement the Prophet ﷺ said, حُفَّةُ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ وَحُفَّةُ النَّارُ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. He said the paradise is surrounded with disliked things, but the fire is surrounded with lust and desirable things. Look at that. That's why. All that is beneficial for the son of Adam, they run away from that when that is the thing that is disliked. They dislike the things that's good for them. And the fire is surrounded around all things that are desirable because the shahawat chases it. You see the danger of desires, right? So paradise is surrounded around disliked things. Waking up 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning sometimes for salat, right? It be cold, right? Fasting, right? All day, right? The desires, lower desires don't like it. So that's why it has to be trained and muzzled because it's wow, like a beast, right? Putting your nafs in check, putting your appetite in check. That's what fasting do. It comes to break the appetite and increase taqwa, right? So the paradise is surrounded around things that we dislike that's good for us. And the fire is surrounded around all pleasurable things. Gobble, 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 shahawat, right? And those are the things of gratification and self-pleasures that are not actually good. And they're destructive, but yet we pursue it, right? That's when you have an unchecked appetite and an unchecked desire. And so we have to put a muzzle on it, like a pit bull. They put a muzzle on the dog's nose because he's always biting, right? Snapping at people. And so our lower desires are like that. It's always wanting and grabbing, right? You know, it always wants desirable, pleasurable things to satisfy its overwhelming propensity of its desire. That's what shahawat is. Exceeding the limits of its aspirations. Because it's okay to have a desire. But when it exceeds the limits of its desire is an unchecked appetite. Right? And so alhamdulillah, these are the remedies, the diseases and the remedies to trying to get, there's an unchecked ego as well. So egos and desires are like the atom's bomb. Right? Because there is a just aspect of egos, which ego is for us to stand up for justice, to protect and guard. But when a person gets drunk, the ego gets drunk from what? Desires again. Then the person becomes more narcissistic and he gets big-headed, as we would say. He's letting things get to his head. That actually means he's letting things get to his ego, right? And so it's very important to humble yourself. So you counteract egos with khushu'. Khushu' is being humble, right? Khashiyat, right? Khasha'at, to be humble, to show humility, right? So those are the aspects of the importance of purifying character and thoughts, and how evil deeds and sins causes the blindness of all the faculties. Anybody have any statements, questions? Any statements, questions? Yeah, your habits, bad habits, right? Right. Go ahead, Aisha.
Oh, I don't have anything. I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So remember all these things. Try to apply them in the life that we live. That's the only way they'll really be caught. To catch something is to really catch it in your behavior, right? To be able to function and apply it. And it's really at the given time of the crisis that you may go through. That's when it truly counts. And so we got to always know the timing of learning. There's always a time of learning, but the true timing of learning is when something's in opposition to what you've learned. Then you will have to apply what you learned to counteract the undesirable behavior, the undesirable character, right? Inshallah. So alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, may Allah increase our knowledge, wisdom and understanding and spiritual insight, and protect us from the torment of the grave and the hellfire, protect us from the signs and tribulations of Ad-Dajjal. We also want to understand that the event that is coming up November 26th and November 27th, we ask everyone to participate in this event. Is much more important than just a event or vending and things of that nature. It is a starting point to actually wake up the sleeping giant. And the waking up of the sleeping giant is all those individuals, especially the ethnic group of African descent, to be able to begin a mobilization movement in terms of making their community more prosperous. As Malcolm talked about black economics. And black economics was truly to empower specifically the people who were destitute in all the spheres of the multi-complex system. Economic, lack of economic empowerment, political unity, all of this. This thing is more than just an event. It is a starting point to have continuity to it, to make sure that we can maintain on the flow of economic prosperity and a true community of Islam. Because today we don't have true communities of Islam. We have organizations, which is only morphed into organizations like America have, right? They're only but statements and founding foundations with names, titles, just to increase the mobility of the organization and foundations. They do nothing for the people as a whole. You know, and only those who are included in that are the self-interest. It's called individualism, right? Individualism is where that you're only in the best interest of your organization. And basically in most of these organizations, we don't see ourselves in the future in these organizations because they're only based on nepotism, right? Most of the Muslim communities based on nepotism and based on tribalism, based on nationalism, and based on upbringing their own ethnical backgrounds and not for the whole. And there's no Muslim community that I see as a model of what we known in the past of the 3 generations who actually established the community of Islam in Medina, right? That is something that is lost today. وقولي قولي هذا واستغفر الله والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Remember tomorrow's classes we are doing whoever's on the basic alphabets of Arabic, we're doing that at what is it? At 10:30, I believe, and then no, not at 10:30. It's at 11. The 10:45 class is the 10:30 class is the Arabic grammar class, the advanced class first, and then the Arabic alphabet, and then at 5:15, 5:30. No, it was supposed to be 4:30. We're doing the second part of purification, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.